Welcome to the deep dive. Diving into the sources you sent us, we're exploring a concept that really gets to the heart of how we experience ourselves and the world: ontological insecurity.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Our mission in this deep dive is basically to unpack this idea and pull out the most important takeaways for you.
Okay, let's jump right in. So, ontological insecurity. It isn't just about feeling unsafe from like a physical threat outside.
Right, not like danger in the usual sense.
Exactly. It's this
Yeah.
really deep-seated anxiety, a fundamental uncertainty about the stability, the coherence of your own self-identity.
And your experience of reality itself.
Yeah, precisely. Can you actually trust that your sense of self is continuous day to day?
Yeah.
Can you rely on the world feeling consistently, well, real? That's the core question.
And this idea, it has some interesting roots, doesn't it? Came from psychiatry first.
That's right. R.D. Laing, a psychiatrist, explored it first, mainly in a clinical context.
And then later, Anthony Giddens, the sociologist, picked it up.
Yep. Laing introduced it when he was working with mental illness, particularly thinking about schizophrenia.
Okay.
He described it as this inability to just take for granted the basic stability of yourself or the world. Most of us just assume it, right?
We do, yeah. It's the default setting.
But for individuals experiencing this insecurity, it can feel fragmented. Laing talked about fears of being like engulfed or dissolved by other people.
Well, that sounds intense.
Yeah, or just feeling like their own being is really precarious. And he often linked this to deeply invalidating environments, like contradictory messages, what he called double binds, that make it almost impossible to build a stable sense of self or reality.
So Lane saw it as this extreme vulnerability, often tied to difficult early experiences. But Giddens, how did he take this clinical idea and apply it more, well, broadly, to society?
That's where it gets really relevant for everyone, I think.
Yeah.
Giddens adopted the concept, yeah, but he argued that this underlying need for ontological security, that sense of self-continuity, that trust in the world, it's essential for everyone to function normally.
Ah, okay. So not just an issue in severe cases.
Right. He saw those feelings. Laing described the fragmentation, the instability, not just as symptoms, but as potential risks or experiences anyone might face navigating modern life, even without, a clinical diagnosis.
But you're saying the way society is structured can actually influence this feeling. It's not purely personal.
Exactly. Giddens argued that late modern societies, with their incredibly rapid change, globalization, the constant flood of digital media, the breakdown of older traditions and structures.
Things feel less stable, less predictable.
Totally. All that makes maintaining that basic sense of security much harder. The old anchors aren't always there, or they feel shaky.
That definitely resonates. The sheer pace of everything can feel overwhelming. So, how do people cope when things feel so uncertain at a basic level?
Well, Giddens suggested we develop routines. Predictable habits help. We also try to create coherent stories, narratives about who we are.
Make sense of our lives.
Uh-huh. And we build systems of social trust in people, in institutions. These are ways we try to kind of impose order and predictability on things.
But those coping mechanisms aren't foolproof, I guess.
No, and your sources point this out. Big disruptive events, think terrorism, economic collapse, even major personal trauma, they can shatter those routines and narratives.
And shake that fundamental sense of stability.
Profoundly. They can make you question everything, that deep feeling of being grounded in reality.
Let's make this concrete. The sources you sent gave some really specific examples of how this plays out, like on the ground.
Yeah, okay. So imagine being constantly bombarded with disinformation, conspiracy theories online.
Right, which happens all the time now.
One source talked about how, over time, this doesn't just change your opinions, it can actually make your very perception of what's real feel unstable. It erodes that shared sense of reality.
Okay, that's a scary thought.
Or think about the experience described in another source of an immigrant navigating a totally foreign culture.
Without the usual support.
Exactly. No familiar language, norms, social scaffolding. It's way more than just culture shock. It can be a deep challenge to your identity, a real hit of ontological insecurity where the world feels alien, unpredictable.
And then there was the example on a more personal level, gaslighting in a relationship.
Yes, that's a powerful one. Someone in an emotionally abusive relationship constantly being told their reality is wrong, their memory is faulty.
Undermining their sanity, basically.
It makes their inner world feel completely untrustworthy.
Yeah.
And then by extension, the outer world too. That creates this profound insecurity about what's even real.
It's really striking how this concept connects the personal psychological experience with broader social forces.
Absolutely. And it has major implications beyond just the individual. Think about politics.
How so?
Well, sometimes populist leaders tap into this underlying insecurity, right? They offer very simple, very clear narratives about identity, order, belonging.
In a world that feels confusing and chaotic.
Exactly. It helps explain why those simple answers can be so appealing when people feel existentially adrift.
It really highlights how our individual well-being is tied up with social and cultural changes. What about helping people who feel this insecurity?
Therapeutically, addressing it often involves helping someone, rebuild a more coherent story themselves, a narrative that makes sense,
And of finding stable ground again.
and establishing safe, trusting relationships. Those can act as vital anchors, providing stability.
Right. Okay, so to recap this deep dive, ontological insecurity isn't just a clinical term. It's this profound existential state.
Uh-huh. And it intersects deeply with our social world, with the structures of modern life.
It helps us understand how people try to find stability, that sense of belonging, in a world that often feels very uncertain.
It boils down to that fundamental human need for a stable sense of self and, well, a reliable reality.
So as we wrap up, based on your sources, here's a thought to leave you with. How might this underlying need for ontological security shape how people react, not just to big societal shifts, but to the constant flood of information, or even just the everyday uncertainties we all face? Something to think about.